Of course, in the world today, we have many evil leaders, and we can only hope that there is some good in them. And it might help to look into past examples of how fate is lending a hand in all of this. So you have to consider leaders, yes, and you have to consider fate, yes. And with fate, you have to consider the fingers of fate, let's say, well, whose arm is attached to the hand, to the fingers of fate. And so these various leaders come into power. And of course, you have to consider scriptures in all of this, because the powers that be are ordained of God. There is no power but of God. In other words, God allows some of these powers to come into play. And the deciding factor would be, yes, the king himself, the leader himself. We now largely call these prime ministers presidents. And in the past, they had judges and then kings. So this is interesting when you look into examples of the past. With examples of the past, you get future reference to today. In that, all of these things happen unto them for ensamples. In other words, it's a sample, an example. All of these things happen unto them, unto these various kings even, for ensamples, examples, in other words, and are written for our admonition upon whom the ends of the world are come. Now, most people, when they, let's say, the deciding factor would also be the people themselves, what kind of king do they want? And do they want a godly government, or do they simply want a king after the world, a worldly king? So all of these things are deciding factors, and of course God knows the heart. So an interesting story to refer to would be where you see the hand of, let's say, fate, the hand of God being the hand of fate, the fingers of fate. People talk about fate, they're happy to talk about fate. Well, is fate a mindless force? So some choose to believe that some leaders come into power and it's all by fate. Others might believe it's all by choice and democracies and such. Others choose to believe that kings are selected by invisible powers that are the elite, the global elite, the hidden hand, or the powers that be are ordained of God, and therefore you're going into the spiritual, in that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world. So these rulers of the darkness of this world, placing these various puppet kings into seats of power, and these put into power through manipulation of the powers that are working together with the higher powers, not necessarily the higher power being God. And all power in heaven and earth, in fact, has been given into the hands of Jesus Christ. So there is no power but of God. In other words, the powers that be are ordained of God. God may allow these powers to come into play. This largely depended upon the hearts of man. So here's an example in, we're looking at 1 Samuel, and we're in chapter 8. This really does spell out how fate doesn't just lend a hand, maybe that's a bit of an understatement, but fate plays a large part in all of this, and people's hearts play a large part in all of this, as to what kind of leader you might have. So here's 1 Samuel chapter 8, and it came to pass when Samuel was old, that he made his sons judges over Israel. Now remember, before they had kings, they had judges. And the judge over the nation here, over the children of Israel here, is Samuel. Now, Samuel was a man that got messages from God, that heard from God. Samuel was in fact called a seer, somebody who sees into the spiritual and gets spiritual messages, revelations and visions from God, and therefore rules over the people as coming from the spiritual. But the problem with this was the children of Israel didn't want a man after God's heart, after the spiritual. They wanted a king like all of the other nations. And it came to pass when Samuel was old, that he made his sons judges over Israel. The assumption there would be Samuel's going to die soon, and his sons would now be the new leaders, the new judges over Israel. Well, this is how complicated life can get, because as it says here, now the name of his first born was Joel, and the name of his second was Abiah. They were judges in Beersheba. And his sons walked not in his ways, but turned aside after lucre. So his sons weren't in short good. They didn't follow after the spiritual, they followed after filthy lucre, being money. But turned aside after lucre and took bribes and perverted judgment. So I guess this got out of the children of Israel. Why should we have these ruling over us? Their interest is only money, and they don't give sound judgment. They take bribes. They can be bought. They can be persuaded by rich people who want their way as opposed to our way. And of course, we see this in the world today. And so life can get extremely complicated, let's say. So fair enough, the children of Israel didn't want these to rule over them. But the problem with that was that could give them an excuse to lean to their own understanding and their own arm and seek a king after the flesh as opposed to a king after God, or a judge on this occasion. So in fact, they actually wanted a king to rule over them and not a judge. Then all the elders of Israel gathered themselves together and came to Samuel unto Ramah, and said unto him, Behold, thou art old, and thy sons walk not in thy ways. So here's their golden excuse. Yes, they had a point of view here. His sons had turned after filthy lucre and perverted judgment in taking bribes. So why should these rule over us? So that can give people the golden excuse they're looking for, because what they want all along is a king, so they can be like other nations and have this power like them, be worldly and powerful like other nations in the worldly sense, not necessarily in the spiritual seeking after God's heart sense. And said unto him, so they said unto Samuel, and said unto him, Behold, thou art old, and thy sons walk not in thy ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all of the nations. They want to be like all of the nations round about, worldly, a powerful king. But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, Give us a king to judge us. And Samuel prayed unto the Lord. They're not seeking after God. They're leaning to their own arm, to their own pride, and wanting a king. And the Lord said unto Samuel, Hearken unto the voice of the people in all that they say unto thee. For they have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them. Now this is important because we see the world today, because people go out and vote, they seek after a king. Does anyone consider God in this matter? So what kind of king will you get if you don't consider God in this matter? How many people go out and vote and seek after a new leader, a new government, a new prime minister, a new president? How many go out and put their heart in their hand and pray and ask God to lead and guide them to the right king? Well, credit where due in America, a lot of Christians have gone out and voted for Donald Trump. So God knowing people's hearts and God knowing what kind of leader people deserve would, of course, take all of this into consideration. Now, I'm not saying Donald Trump's a good or bad leader, but it's often the case that there's good in these people. It's not a case that they're all bad or all evil. Often there's good in these kings. They're not necessarily altogether bad and altogether evil. Now, this is interesting because when we look at Saul, he actually, the new king, that was going to be the king, they seek after a king, and of course eventually Saul would be this king. Saul was ordained by God to be the king over Israel, all being said, the people seeking after a king so they could be like other nations. God, of course, being merciful and knowing their hearts, I would eventually send them a king. The interesting thing about Saul is that he started out good but ended up evil. So there's good in him. And it wasn't the case that he was altogether evil. So it's often the case that with these kings, you can only hope that, yes, you can consider that most of them are evil. You can only hope and pray that there's good in them, and a good might come of it. In fact, in spite of their many sins, and God is in it. So God was in it as far as King Saul becoming the king. He actually started out wow, because I guess at that time it appears that the children of Israel were actually crying out to God. Yes, they saw a king, but also they're also crying out to God for under oppression or of some sort. So under the oppression of the governments around them, so that you have to consider the nations around them, because they had problems with the Philistines. So they're often oppressed and afflicted and attacked, and all of these wars would break out between the children of Israel and the Philistines. So God would take all of this into consideration. So it's a case of what's on people's hearts, really largely dependent upon what kind of king they get. Well, these people were seeking a king after their own flesh, and they're rejecting God. They weren't looking to God's man being Samuel, though Samuel, of course, had influence, and he told them what kind of king they would expect. If indeed they seek after a king, they didn't listen to Samuel, though. According to all the works which they have done, so the Lord speaking, according to the works which they have done since the day that I brought them out of Egypt, even unto this day, wherewith they have forsaken me and served other gods, so do also unto them. So the children of Israel were becoming evil, therefore they saw a king. Now therefore hearken unto their voice, howbeit protest solemnly unto them, and show them the man of the king that shall reign over them. And Samuel told all the words of the Lord unto the people that asked of him a king. Now Samuel is a man who hears from God. He absolutely heard from God. Therefore he would tell the people specific things from God. Samuel being a seer. In other words, someone who sees into the spiritual, someone who sees even into the future. Someone who gets messages from God on this occasion. While anyone who gets a message from the spiritual would either get it from God or Satan. There's no other way, there's no other source. Because Samuel's leading to the arm of the Spirit and the arm of the Lord, and listening to the voice of God, and then getting specific things from God to tell the people. But would the people listen on this occasion? No, they didn't. Now therefore hearken unto their voice, howbeit yet solemnly protest unto them, and show them the man of the king that shall rule over them. And Samuel told all the words of the Lord unto the people that asked of him a king. And he said, this will be the man of the king that shall reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for himself for his chariots, and to be horsemen, and some shall run before his chariot. So what's the first priority of a king? What's the first priority of many leaders in the world today? War. To set up a big army and all of this, and they call it the military-industrial complex, and all of this, and all of the money and manpower and labour is all put into war. They want a king after the world. So the first priority here would be for the king to set up a big army and recruit these young men into the army. And he said, this will be the man of the king that shall reign over you. He would take your sons and appoint them for himself as for his chariots, and to be his horsemen, and some shall run before his chariots. And he will appoint him captains over thousands and captains over fifties, and will set them to ear his ground and to reap his harvest, and make his instruments of war and instruments of his chariots. And he will take your daughters to be confectionaries and to be cooks and to be bakers. Note here, they're all now serving the king and not necessarily themselves. And he will take your fields and your vineyards and your olive yards, even the best of them, and give them to his servants. And he would take the tenth of your seed and of your vines, so tax is really, and he would take the tenth of your seed and your vineyards and give to his officers and his servants. And he would take your men servants and your maid servants and your goodliest young men and your asses and appoint them to his work. He would take the tenth of your sheep, and ye shall be his servants. And ye shall cry out in that day because of your king, which ye shall have chosen, and the Lord will not hear you in that day. Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel. They didn't want to listen to Samuel. They didn't listen to God no more. Still, they wanted a king. And they said, Nay, but we will have a king over us, that we may also be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles. And Samuel heard all of the words of the people, and he rehearsed them in the ears of the Lord. And the Lord said to Samuel, Hearken unto their voice, and make them a king. And Samuel said unto the men of Israel, Go ye every man unto his city. So when they say people get the kind of king they deserve, people get the kind of leader they deserve, we have to consider this story here. All of these things happen unto them for ensamples, and are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. So if people seek after a king and forget God, this is the kind of king they will get. This is an example of the kind of king that they will get, that this king will gratify himself and consume the peoples of these various nations upon their own lusts, setting themselves up as great kings with great armies, and all of these people now serving the king, and not necessarily themselves anymore, but all of it goes over to the king. Now here's an interesting, the story goes on, because the secret people now seek after a king, and with this, even with this, God warned them what kind of king they would get. God is merciful, and God sees the heart of man. God sees the heart of the whole nation. And so, yes, they seek after a king. So let's see how this all transpires. And it's interesting when you think of that saying, some people are born to it, these leaders, some people are born to it. Others could seek it, and others have it thrust upon them. Well, this seems to play out in this episode here, this chapter here. Now, there was a man of Benjamin whose name was Kish, the son of Abiel, the son of Zeror, the son of Becherah, the son of Aphiah, a Benjamite, a mighty man of power. And he had a son. So it appears that Saul here comes from a background, his family lineage appears to be men of power in Israel, I guess. And he had a son whose name was Saul. Now, Saul's ordained to be the future king. Saul doesn't know it yet. And Saul was interesting because I guess he was born to it, because God ordains people to come into the world, and therefore we've all got, God's got a plan for all of us. And therefore God's plan for Saul was that he would be king over Israel. Saul wasn't necessarily seeking it. In fact, Saul tried to escape it, in fact. And so this Saul comes from a powerful background. His parents are no doubt influential in Israel. And he had a son whose name was Saul, a choice young man and a goodly. Now here's the mercy of God. There's good in him. This is interesting because a lot of these leaders, there can still be good in them. And there was not among the men of the children of Israel a goodlier person than he. From his shoulders and upward, he was higher than any of the people. So this Saul's quite tall. You could say most men, let's say, are 6 foot tall. I guess he was about 7 foot tall. So he's quite a tall man. And here's how interesting how, let's say, the fingers of fate. We all like to believe there's fate. And we might be happy to go along with the reality of let's say, the fingers of fate. But a lot of people might want to take this a step further, many steps further. Well, if there's a hand of fate, if there's fingers of fate, then what's the arm? Is fate a minus force? Then if there's fingers of fate, a hand of fate, and an arm of fate, where would the shoulder be? Then there's the neck, and then there's the head that directs the fingers, that directs the arm, that directs the hand. So the fingers of fate have to be attached to a thinking power. That power so happens to be God. So, and here's how God moves, they say, in mysterious ways. He's wondrously performed. In other words, these events unfold in people's lives, and it might be that you're going about your daily life as you do, doing even mundane tasks, and suddenly you stumble upon the power behind it all, because that power so happens to be God. And here's God directing such a course of events that you might be going about your everyday life, but suddenly you might stumble upon the power behind the world here and your own life here, and God ordaining these various kings to come into power. Though prior to this, they may not even seek it at that time. They may not even realize they were born to it. They might not be seeking it. But with Saul, you'd say he was one of those that, in a sense, let's say, had it thrust upon him because he tried to wiggle out of it. This is where the story is interesting. And it's interesting how you could be doing one thing, but in fact, the manipulation, let's say, or the powers behind it, or it can be manipulation if it's coming from the wrong source, or it can be a good thing by design if it's coming from God. So you have to be careful here. There can be those that are manipulating powers. The Prince of Darkness grim, we tremble not for him, his rage we can endure, for lo, his doom is sure. We have that to contend with. But we also have a higher power than this, and that higher power so happens to be God. That word above all earthly powers, no thanks to them abideth. So you have the powers that are ordained by God, and these are very manipulative in assuming they're doing one thing, turns out they're doing another. Well, God can so often operate the same in that it appears you're doing one thing, or these events are unfolding in your life, but there are other powers at work, and we have to remember here that the higher power is always God, and not be just feel that we're subjected to these other powers of manipulation as coming from the hand of Satan. So it's kind of an arm wrestling match here going on in the spirit world, and that arm wrestling match, God is the one who always wins. And a lot here depends upon the people's hearts. So here's the unusual event that unfolded, and that this led to Saul being anointed to be king. And the ashes of Kish, Saul's father, were lost. Now, this is he has ashes, and looks like, well, right, the ashes have gone astray. And of course, Saul's father says, look, can you go and find the ashes, these ashes that have gone astray, and bring them back, of course. But actually, where was Saul going? He's actually on his way to be anointed as king. He's on his way to meet a seer, and that seer so happens to be Samuel. And if Samuel getting messages from God and knew that Saul was coming, because God had told him so. God told him that Saul would come to him, and he would then anoint him to be king. So as far as Saul's concerned, he's gone out looking for donkeys. As far as God's concerned, these donkeys have gone astray. In order to lead Saul to Samuel to do what? To anoint Saul, for Samuel to anoint Saul to be the king over Israel. And the ashes of Kish, Saul's father, were lost. And Kish said to Saul, his son, take now one of these servants with thee, and arise, and seek the ashes. And he passed through Mount Ephraim, and passed through the land of Shalisha, but they found them not. Then they passed through the land of Shalim, and there they were not. And he passed through the land of the Benjamites, but they found them not, because the door was opening and shutting here. God obviously is good at opening and closing doors. Jesus said, I'm he that openeth, and no man shutteth, and no man openeth. So all of these doors closing here, he wasn't in these various places. All of this leading him to the ultimate conclusion that he'd need to go and see the seer. And when they were come to the land of Zuph, Saul said to his servants that were with him, Come, and let us return, lest my father leave caring for the asses and take thought for us. They obviously had a long search on their hands, and he was worried about his dad. Perhaps it went on for days, and they hadn't found these asses. Well, Dad's going to be worried about me, wondering where I am, if we don't return to my dad, says Saul to his servant. And he said unto him, Behold, now there is, this is Saul's servant speaking here. And he said unto him, Behold, now there is in this city a man of God, and he is an honourable man. All that he saith cometh surely to pass. Now let us go thither, peradventure he can show us our way, that we should go. We'll go and see the seer. Then said Saul to his servant, But behold, if we go, what shall we bring the man? For the bread is spent in our vessels, and there is not a present to bring to the man of God. What have we? And no doubt running out of food, I guess. And the servant answered Saul again and said, Behold, I have here at hand the fourth part of a shekel of silver. That will I give to the man of God to tell us our way. Before time in Israel, when a man went to inquire of God, thus he spake, Come, and let us go to the seer. For he that is now called a prophet was before called a seer. Seer, someone who sees a seer, someone who sees into the spiritual, that gets messages from God. Now Samuel got very specific messages from God. Then said Saul to his servant, Well said, come, let us go. So they went unto the city where the man of God was. Well, unbeknownst to Saul, God was moving in mysterious ways here. Yes, the asses had gone astray. This must have been at the hand of God. And therefore, Saul going to look for these asses would lead him eventually to Samuel. And as they went up the hill to the city, they found young maidens going out to draw water, and said unto them, Is the seer here? And they answered them and said, He is. Behold, he is before you. Make haste now, for he came today to the city. For there is a sacrifice of the people today in the high place. Well, this sacrifice was arranged by Samuel for Saul. Saul didn't know this. He's simply going about his daily life, looking for these asses to return back to his father's house. Unbeknownst to him, it was ordained for him to go and meet the seer, and for the seer, Samuel, to anoint him as king. And as soon as ye come into the city, ye shall straightway find him before he go up to the high place to eat. For the people will not eat until he come, because he doth bless the sacrifice, and afterwards they eat that be bidden. Now therefore get you up, for about this time ye shall find him. And they went unto the city, and when they were come into the city, behold, Samuel came out against them for to go up to the high place. Now the Lord had told Samuel in his ear a day before Saul came. Samuel knows he's coming. A day before. So here's the seer. He's seeing into the spiritual. He's got a specific message from God. And he knows the future king of Israel is on his way. Now the Lord had told Samuel in his ear a day before Saul came, saying, Tomorrow, about this time, I will send thee a man out of the land of Benjamin. And thou shalt anoint him to be captain over my people Israel, that he may save my people out of the hand of the Philistines. So the children of Israel here are oppressed by the Philistines. For I have looked upon my people because of their cry is come unto me. So in spite of the fact that they're seeking a king after their own lusts, a king of power, there's also another factor here in the equation. They're oppressed by the Philistines, and some are crying out to God. So the people get the kind of king they deserve. Samuel told them, prophesied, the seer Samuel had told them how Saul would turn out. But Saul in the beginning appears to be a good king, but he would turn out to be a bad king. So often the case with these kings that there's good in them, but sometimes the evil can outweigh the good and even destroy the good that's in him. So God willing, whatever king we get, God willing, whoever's praying for the kind of king we get, God will take all of these factors into the equation. And it turns out here that people were even crying out to God in spite of the fact that they also wanted a king. And God taking all of this into consideration. So, for I've looked upon my people because their cry is come unto me. There's also this fact in the equation. We can't make sweeping statements and say every king is evil. They often are. But God willing, there's good in them, and God's factored this into the equation that yes, people are crying out under their oppression, and therefore God will take this into consideration in the kind of king people get. And when Samuel saw Saul, the Lord said unto him, Behold, the man whom I spake to thee of, this same shall reign over my people. Then Saul drew near to Samuel in the gate and said, Tell me, I pray thee, where the seer's house is. And Samuel answered Saul and said, I am the seer. Go up before me unto the high place, for ye shall eat with me today and tomorrow. Because he knows he's coming, and there he is. I will let thee go, and I will tell thee all that is in thine heart. So I guess before Saul even told Samuel. And as for thine asses, well, Saul is telling, Samuel is now telling Saul of the asses. I'm assuming here that Saul, let's get this right, Saul was looking for the asses, and of course Samuel knows all about this. And as for thine asses that were lost 3 days ago, set not thine mind on them, for they are found. And on whom is all the desire of Israel? Is it not on thee, and on all thy father's house? And Saul answered and said, Am I not a Benjamite of the smallest of tribes of Israel, and my family the least of all the families of the tribe of Benjamin? Wherefore then speakest thou so to me? And Samuel took Saul and his servant, and brought them into the parlour, and made them sit in the chiefest place among them that were bidden, which were about 30 persons. And Samuel said unto the cook, Bring the portion which I gave thee, which I said unto thee, set it by thee. And the cook took up the shoulder which was upon it, and set it before Saul. So the choicest meat is set before Saul. And Samuel said, Behold, that which is left, set it before thee, and eat. For unto this time have it been kept for thee, since I said, I invited the people, since I invited the people. So Saul did eat with Samuel that day. So it even kept back the choicest bit of meat for Saul, because Samuel knew Saul was coming. And when they were come down from the high places into the city, Samuel communed with Saul upon the top of the house. And they arose early, and it came to pass about the spring of the day, so early in the morning, that Samuel called Saul to the top of the house, saying, Up, that I may send thee away. And Saul arose, and they went out both of them, he and Samuel, abroad. And as they were going down to the end of the city, Samuel said to Saul, bid the servant pass on before us. And he passed on. But stand thou still, while I may show thee the word of God. Then Samuel took a vial of oil, and poured it upon his head, and kissed him, and said, is it not because the Lord hath anointed thee to be captain over his inheritance? When thou art departed from me today, then thou shalt find 2 men by Rachel sepulchre in the border of Benjamin at Zalzah, and they will say unto thee, the asses which thou wentest to seek are found. And lo, thy father have left the care of the asses, and sorrow for you, saying, what shall I do for my son? So Samuel, being a seer, knew all of this, and he knew where the asses were. And then shalt thou go on forward from thence, and thou shalt come to the plain of Tabor. And there shall meet thee 3 men going up to God to Bethel, one carrying 3 kids, and another carrying 3 loaves of bread, and another carrying a bottle of wine. And they will salute thee, and give thee 2 loaves of bread, which thou shalt receive of their hands. After that, thou shalt come to the hill of God, and where is the garrison of the Philistines. And it shall come to pass, when thou art come thither to the city, that thou shalt meet a company of prophets coming down from the high place, with a psaltery, and a tabret, and a pipe, and a harp before them, and they shall prophesy. And the Spirit of the Lord will come upon thee, and thou shalt prophesy with them, and shall be turned into another man. And let it be, when these signs are come unto thee. So indeed, no doubt, all of this came to pass, everything Samuel had said, him being a seer, all of these events that would unfold, Saul meeting these various prophets, and then prophesying. All of this came to pass, this telling Saul, no doubt, that indeed God had chosen him to be the king. And the Spirit of the Lord shall come upon thee, and thou shalt prophesy with them, and thou shalt be turned into another man. And let it be, when these signs are come unto thee, that thou do as occasion serve thee, for God is with thee. So in other words, when all these signs come upon you, Saul, this will tell you that indeed, by these signs ordained by God, that you are ordained to be the king. And because Saul then became another man. And thou shalt go down before me to Gilgal, and behold, I will come down unto thee to offer burnt offerings, and to sacrifices of peace offerings. 7 days shalt thou tarry till I come to thee, and show thee what thou shalt do. And it was so that when he had turned to his back to go from Samuel, God gave him another heart. And all those signs came to pass that day. And when they came thither to the hill, behold, a company of prophets met him, and the Spirit of God came upon him, and he prophesied among them. And it came to pass, when he that knew him before said, behold, he prophesied among the prophets. In other words, Saul's changed. He's now getting messages from God. Now Saul is anointed by God, and is also getting messages from God. So getting messages from God, and now leading the people of Israel, now king of Israel, a king that would get messages from God in leading the children of Israel. And it came to pass, when all that knew him before time saw that, behold, he prophesied among the prophets. Then the people said one to another, what is this that is come unto the son of Kish? Is Saul also among the prophets? Well, no, he's not. Also, he's now among the prophets, yes. But he's also ordained to be king. And one of the same place answered, said, but who is their father? Their father, of course, is God. Therefore it became a proverb, it's so also among the prophets. And when he had made an end of prophesying, he came to the high place. And Saul's uncle said unto him and to his servant, Whither went ye? And he said, To seek the asses. And when we saw that they were nowhere, we came to Samuel. And Saul's uncle said, Tell me, I pray thee, what Samuel said unto thee. Now here's Saul, he's trying to wiggle out of it. And Saul said unto his uncle, he told us plainly that the asses were found. But of the matter of the kingdom whereof Samuel spake, he told him not. And Samuel called the people together unto the Lord to Mizpah, and said unto the children of Israel, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, I brought up Israel out of Egypt, and delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians, and out of the hand of all the kingdoms, and of them that oppress you. And ye have this day rejected your God, who himself saved you out of all your adversaries and your tribulations. And ye have said unto him, Nay, but set a king over us. Now therefore present yourselves before the Lord by your tribes and by your thousands. And when Samuel had caused all the tribes of Israel to come near, the tribe of Benjamin was taken. And when it caused the tribe of Benjamin to come near by their families, the family of Matri was taken. And Saul the son of Kish was taken. And when they sought him, it's Saul trying to run away from it. So he didn't quite seek it, but it was thrust upon him in this sense. He could not be found. Therefore they inquired of the Lord further, if the man should yet come thither. And the Lord answered, Behold, he hath hid himself among the stuff. They ran and fetched him thence, and when he stood among the people, he was higher than any of the people from his shoulders and upward. And Samuel said to all the people, See ye him whom the Lord hath chosen, that there is none like him among all the people. And all the people shouted and said, God save the king. Then Samuel told the people the man of the kingdom, and wrote it in the book, and laid it before the Lord. And Samuel sent all the people away, every man to his house. And Saul also went home to Gibeah, and there went with him a band of men whose hearts God had touched. But the children of Belial, how shall this man save us? And they despised him, and brought him no presents, but he held his peace. So that's the story of Saul, ordained by God and to be anointed to be king, not necessarily seeking it himself, but largely having it largely thrust upon him in this sense, in God's mercy for his people. And now leading over the children of Israel, the powers that be ordained by God there, and the king ordained by God to save the children of Israel from the Philistines. And of course, his heart being in the hand of God, and Saul also getting messages from God in leading the children of Israel. So praise Jesus.